At 27, Paris Jackson just said what millions have whispered for years. Michael Jackson didn't just die. He may have been killed. In a bold new interview, she finally breaks her silence and hints that her father's tragic death wasn't what we were told. What does she know? Why did she wait this long? And what shocking evidence has suddenly resurfaced? This isn't just about conspiracy. It's about a daughter's heartbreak, hidden truths, and the weight of a legacy the world refused to let go. Stay with us as we uncover the emotional and controversial confession that's changing everything. Michael Jackson's final moments. June 25, 2009, wasn't supposed to be the day the world lost a legend. That Thursday afternoon, Michael Jackson, once the most famous man on earth, was rushed to the UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles after being found unresponsive in his home. He was just 50 years old. The news hit like an earthquake. Fans stood outside the hospital in tears. The internet nearly broke. Music stopped. And for millions, time stood still. The official cause of death was chilling. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office confirmed that Jackson died from acute propofol intoxication, a powerful surgical anesthetic, combined with other sedatives. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, had been administering the drug to help Jackson sleep, allegedly at the pop star's request. But it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary case of medical negligence. It was something darker. Dr. Murray would later be convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2011. But the questions didn't end there. Why was Michael, a man so public yet so private, taking hospital-grade sedatives just to get rest? Why were the people around him, his doctors, managers, handlers, allowing this? And perhaps most troubling, was someone benefiting from his death? Michael's death certificate listed homicide under the cause of death, a technical term that only deepened the mystery. Inside the Jackson family compound, chaos swirled. His children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, were shielded from the media but couldn't escape the grief. 11-year-old Paris Jackson clung to her family, too young to understand all the politics surrounding her father's final days, but old enough to feel something wasn't right. At his public memorial, she famously broke down and said through tears, "Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine." That moment echoed worldwide. But behind that innocence, something was shifting. The little girl who had once been protected by masks and private tutors was about to face the full weight of global suspicion and family secrets. As the world tried to make sense of Michael Jackson's shocking death, his daughter Paris was quietly pulled into the storm. What began as public mourning would soon turn into personal trauma, and Paris was left to navigate the impossible grief of losing a father, while living under the spotlight he had once tried so hard to shield her from. Paris Jackson's silent struggle. Paris Jackson grew up in a world unlike any other. As Michael Jackson's only daughter, she wasn't just born into fame, she was born into a legacy and a mystery. Her early years were marked by intense privacy. Her father famously covered her face with masks to protect her identity. But when Michael passed, that protection vanished. Suddenly, Paris was center stage in a show she never asked to star in. Almost immediately, the public began to question her. Not her grief, not her loss, but her DNA. With her blue eyes, light skin, and European features, critics speculated loudly, could she really be Michael Jackson's biological daughter? It wasn't just whispers in dark corners of the internet. Major outlets published think pieces, and TV panels debated the question like it was entertainment. This relentless scrutiny would soon take its toll. As she entered her teenage years, Paris began to show signs of emotional strain. She later revealed that she battled severe depression and anxiety, and made multiple suicide attempts. In interviews, she admitted to feeling completely alone, as though the world was determined to define her worth through rumors and speculation. "I was just a kid," she would later say. "I didn't even know who I was yet." But Paris didn't stay broken. She entered rehab, began therapy, and slowly, piece by piece, rebuilt her identity. Music became a major outlet. She formed a band, started acting, and began speaking out about mental health. She didn't shy away from the pain. Instead, she used it to connect with others. Her vulnerability became her strength. Throughout it all, though, one shadow never stopped following her: the question of her paternity. The same people who once loved her father now questioned if she was truly his child. It wasn't just hurtful, it was dehumanizing. DNA doesn't make a dad, Paris once said. Love does. But still, the rumors didn't go away. As Paris began healing in private, the noise in public only got louder. Years of silent suffering had taught her one truth: if she didn't control the narrative, someone else would. And so, after over a decade of doubt and gossip, Paris finally decided to speak out, not just about who her father was, but what she truly believed happened to him. Paris begins to question everything. As Paris Jackson entered adulthood, her perspective on her father's death began to change. The more she learned about the events of June 2009, the more questions she had. The legal ruling may have declared it involuntary manslaughter, but to Paris, something didn't add up. Over the years, she began hinting publicly that she believed her father was murdered, not by a single man, but by a system that failed him. In a 2017 interview with Rolling Stone, Paris broke her silence on the topic that had haunted her for years. He would drop hints about people being out to get him, she said, and at some point he was like, "They're gonna kill me one day." For Paris, those weren't just paranoid ramblings. They were warnings, ones that now seemed tragically accurate. "I believe he was absolutely murdered," she said plainly. Her comments sparked a firestorm. Conspiracy theorists had long believed there were deeper forces at play in Michael's death: corporate interests, legal pressure, the stress of a comeback tour. But hearing those suspicions come from his own daughter gave them new weight. Paris didn't accuse anyone directly, but her message was clear. Her father didn't just die, he was taken from them. She also called out the entertainment industry itself, suggesting that fame came with a price. "He'd talk about the system," she said. "He felt trapped." For Paris, her father's death was not just a personal loss. It was a symbol of how the world treats its greatest talents: build them up, watch them fall, and then dissect the tragedy for years to come. These revelations added another layer to Paris's already complicated public identity. No longer just the daughter of Michael Jackson, she became a voice challenging the official narrative. He was tired, she said, but he still had so much left to give. He just needed people to protect him, and they didn't. After years of silence and suffering, Paris Jackson was no longer just answering questions. She was asking them. And what came next would take the conversation from whispers and headlines to explosive revelations that even the Jackson family had tried to avoid. A mother's truth or a cold transaction. Debbie Rowe was once a mystery to the world, Michael Jackson's ex-wife, the mother of Paris and Prince, and someone who rarely spoke to the media. But in 2009, just months after Michael's death, she broke her silence. And what she said shocked everyone. In a blunt interview with a British tabloid, Rowe claimed, "I was just the vessel. It wasn't Michael's sperm." The sentence landed like a grenade. Suddenly, all the quiet rumors about paternity exploded into a full-blown media storm. If Debbie wasn't lying, then Michael Jackson hadn't biologically fathered his children. The king of pop may have raised them, loved them, protected them. But according to Rowe, he didn't help create them. She painted their marriage as an arrangement. "He was lonely," she said, "and I offered to carry his children." She admitted she was paid for it and had no intention of raising the kids herself. "I've moved on," she added coldly. "I know I will never see my children again." Her words cut deep, especially for Paris, who was only 11 years old at the time. To outsiders, Debbie's statements made the Jackson family look like a transaction, not a home. But for Paris, it became personal. The woman who gave birth to her had disowned her in the press. Her father, the only constant in her life, was gone. and the public now treated her existence like a legal contract. Paris later admitted that hearing Rowe speak so casually about her role left her shattered. Despite everything, Paris never lashed out publicly at Debbie Rowe. In fact, years later, she would start to rebuild a quiet relationship with her birth mother. It was a process rooted in forgiveness and maturity, one that Paris initiated. "I have 2 dads," she once said, "and 1 mom who gave me life. That counts for something." While the world tried to untangle Michael Jackson's personal life, another wave of headlines began swirling, this time from men who claimed they might be the real father. What started with Rowe's comments would soon explode into a parade of alleged sperm donors and questionable DNA links, turning Paris's life into a tabloid guessing game. The parade of possible fathers. Soon after Debbie Rowe's shocking interview, a new kind of circus began. Men from Michael Jackson's orbit, and even beyond, started stepping forward, each claiming a piece of the Jackson family legacy. At the center of it all, Paris Jackson. One of the first to speak up was Mark Lester, a former child actor best known for playing the lead role in the 1968 film Oliver. Lester told newspapers that he and Michael had been close friends, and that Jackson had asked him for a sperm donation. "There's a good chance I'm their dad," he claimed. He even offered to take a DNA test, though one was never publicly confirmed. For a time, tabloids plastered Lester's face next to Paris and Prince's, drawing comparisons and pushing the theory further. But Lester wasn't the only one. Next came Dr. Arnold Klein, Michael Jackson's longtime dermatologist, and the man Debbie Rowe had once worked for. Klein had deep ties to the Jackson family, and whispers began to circulate that he might have been more involved than just professionally. When asked point-blank in an interview whether he was the father, Klein's answer was cryptic. "To the best of my knowledge, I am not." The wording was curious. He didn't say no. He said, "Not to my knowledge." It only fanned the flames. As years passed, conspiracy forums, celebrity bloggers, and even amateur genealogists took on the mystery like it was their own. They matched facial structures, eye colors, and jaw lines. They examined high school photos of Mark Lester's daughters. Some even dragged Macaulay Culkin, Michael's godson, into the mix, suggesting he might be the secret father, based purely on friendship and timing. It was absurd, but it kept trending. Paris, meanwhile, was forced to watch her identity turn into a global guessing game. Her silence wasn't confirmation, it was survival. She later said, "You grow up thinking love is enough. Then people try to reduce you to science." It wasn't just hurtful, it was dehumanizing. And just when Paris thought the chaos might slow down, the internet caught fire again. Not with more interviews or speculation, but with something far more dangerous. Supposed DNA test results, leaked by anonymous sources, that claimed to solve the mystery once and for all. Fake science or sinister motive? In the spring of 2023, social media lit up with a shocking headline. Paris Jackson's DNA proves she is not Michael Jackson's biological daughter. The claim came from a so-called leaked lab report, allegedly released by rogue geneticists. The report offered no verifiable names, no source lab, and no proper documentation. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The files spread like wildfire. People claimed to have screenshots. Others said they saw side-by-side comparisons that confirmed everything. Hashtags like #ParisDNA trended for days. It wasn't just fans who reacted, mainstream media took notice too, but most major outlets refused to run the story. Why? Because the evidence wasn't just unconfirmed, it was deeply invasive and almost certainly fake. Paris, once again, was thrown into chaos. Except this time, she didn't remain silent. In a rare but firm response posted to her official account, she wrote, "This is what they do. They make fake science look real to hurt people. To hurt me. To hurt my dad's legacy. And I'm done playing along." Her message was short, but it hit hard. For years, Paris had lived with whispers and rumors, but this was something new. It wasn't just speculation, it was targeted. A deliberate attempt to chip away at her truth, her identity, and her family's legacy. Experts were quick to weigh in. Geneticists warned that no ethical lab would ever release a client's DNA results publicly without consent. The format of the leaked file looked inconsistent, amateur, and suspicious. Even Jackson family representatives dismissed it as nonsense from anonymous cowards. Still, the damage lingered. For Paris, the leak wasn't just a lie. It was proof that her father's ghost would never stop being picked apart by people who didn't know him. She later said in a private interview, "This wasn't about truth, it was about control. People want to own our story, even in death." With the rumors louder than ever and the internet in chaos, Paris knew it was time. After more than a decade of silence, scandal, and stolen privacy, she sat down in front of the world and delivered the confession no one saw coming. The interview that changed everything. After years of silence, Paris Jackson sat down in a quiet studio. No makeup artists, no flashing lights, just her and a seasoned interviewer. The world watched with bated breath. This wasn't another tabloid story. It wasn't a music promo. It was a confession, a truth she had carried for too long. With a calm, steady voice, Paris said the words that instantly sent shockwaves. "My real father is Michael Jackson." There was no hesitation, no cryptic phrasing. She said it with the same kind of quiet power her father once used on stage. It wasn't just about DNA, it was about identity. "He raised me. He loved me with every part of his heart," she said. "Everything I am, my strength, my creativity, it all comes from him." When asked about the alleged DNA leaks, her response was sharp. "They were fake, fabricated by people who've been trying to tear us down since I was a kid. That wasn't science, it was cruelty disguised as evidence." Her words hit like a slap to the face of every whisperer, every blogger, every person who had tried to reduce her life to a rumor. She didn't just defend her father, she honored him. "People talk about genetics like that's what makes a dad," she said. "But Michael Jackson was there every day. He tucked me in, he held my hand, he made me feel like I mattered. That's what a real father does." Paris also spoke about the toll the rumors had taken on her mental health. "It made me feel like a stranger in my own skin," she admitted, "like I was a character in someone else's story. But I'm done with that. This is my story now." That powerful interview sent shockwaves across the globe. Fans cried, detractors paused, but the internet doesn't stop. As her truth spread across headlines, a tidal wave of reactions flooded in, some full of love, others full of doubt. Paris had spoken, but the world wasn't done speaking back. Divided between belief and doubt. The interview went viral within hours. Twitter exploded. News outlets ran headlines like "Paris Jackson, my father is Michael, period," and "Paris finally breaks her silence." But with the admiration came criticism. The world was divided and loud about it. Supporters flooded social media with praise. "She showed such strength," one fan posted. "Paris took control of her story, and she did it with grace." Others called it long overdue. "She's been a punching bag for years. It was time she stood up." Celebrities and mental health advocates weighed in too. Many applauded Paris for her vulnerability and honesty. "DNA doesn't define a father," tweeted one actress. "Love does, and Michael Jackson gave her that." Even fans who once questioned her now rallied behind her. "I doubted before," a user admitted, "but hearing her speak, it felt real." But the other side wasn't so kind. Some critics dismissed the interview as damage control, calling it a PR stunt. "Why now?" they asked. "Why wait so long if the truth was always clear?" Others demanded proof, DNA results, or more interviews with family members. The doubters didn't want words, they wanted receipts. Some of the most hurtful comments were about her appearance. Again. "She doesn't look like him," trolls repeated. "It's obvious." But Paris didn't respond. She had said her truth, That was enough. Jackson family insiders reportedly backed her up quietly, sharing that Michael had always told those closest to him, "These are my kids. I don't care what anyone else thinks." And now, Paris had echoed that sentiment, publicly, powerfully, and permanently. Paris had shattered the silence, but what came next would prove she was more than just her father's daughter. With the world watching, she didn't retreat. Instead, she moved forward, with music, films, and a new purpose that showed the world exactly who she was becoming. Becoming her own name. After years of being known as, Paris made a bold decision. She was going to be more than a legacy. She was going to build her own. She started with music. Her voice, raw and haunting, told stories of pain, identity, and healing. Tracks like Let Down and Eyelids weren't just songs. They were emotional exorcisms. "Music is where I bleed," she once said. Fans connected with her vulnerability. "She sings like someone who's lived through storms," wrote one critic. Her band, the Soundflowers, gave her a new stage. No flashy costumes, no choreography, just guitars, lyrics, and soul. "It's not about fame," Paris said. "It's about honesty." And in a world still obsessed with comparing her to her father, that honesty became her rebellion. Then came acting. Paris didn't want easy roles. She wanted challenge. In Amazon Prime's Swarm, one line stirred headlines again. "My dad is half black." Some called it a cheeky nod to real-life speculation. Others saw it as a coded confession. But Paris didn't explain it. She didn't need to. Her performance spoke louder than any tweet ever could. At the same time, she embraced activism. Paris became an advocate for mental health, LGBTQ+ rights, and suicide prevention. "If I'm going to be watched anyway," she said, "I might as well use the attention to help." Her openness inspired others. Survivors, misfits, and dreamers saw themselves in her struggle. Paris was no longer just defending a legacy. She was shaping one. And while the world might always associate her with Michael, she was finally proving that she didn't need his shadow to shine. But Paris wasn't done telling her story. With her voice finally heard and her name finally respected, she began working on her most personal project yet, one that would take her beyond music, beyond acting, and deep into the truth of her life behind the scenes. Paris writes her truth. In 2024, whispers began circulating that Paris Jackson was working on a memoir. It wasn't official at first, just vague reports and offhand remarks in interviews. But then she confirmed it. Quietly, calmly, just like everything else she does. "I'm writing," she said. "I've got a lot to say." It wasn't going to be a tell-all, not in the tabloid sense. This book wouldn't be about scandals or name-dropping. It would be about healing, identity, becoming. For Paris, the memoir was more than just a chance to tell her version of events. It was a way to take back the story that others had stolen. As she pens the chapters of her life, one truth becomes clear. Paris Jackson isn't defined by her past. But her past is what shaped the powerful woman she's become. And the pain? That became her purpose. Especially when it comes to mental health, a topic she refuses to stay silent about. The mental health battles. No one saw behind Paris. Jackson's calm voice and quiet strength is a girl who's fought some very dark battles. For years, the world saw the designer clothes, the red carpet smiles, the famous last name. But what they didn't see was the pain. At just 15, Paris attempted suicide. "I didn't want to be alive," she later admitted in a 2017 interview. "I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I felt like the world was screaming at me, and no one could hear me." That was the first time she spoke publicly about depression, and it changed everything. For a long time, Paris had carried her grief alone. The loss of her father at 11, the constant public scrutiny, the rumors, it all chipped away at her. She admitted to self-harming, to feeling like she was never enough, and to questioning whether she was even real without Michael. "People didn't see me as me," she said. "They saw me as a piece of Michael." Paris Jackson's emotional journey didn't just help her survive, it helped her find her calling. And as she rose from the ashes of grief and gossip, she started doing something no one expected, reclaiming her father's legacy in ways both bold and deeply personal. Defending Michael's legacy. Paris Jackson doesn't just carry Michael's name. She carries his spirit, his values, his fight, and she's not letting the world forget who he really was. Because for her, he wasn't just the king of pop. He was Dad. Since her interview, Paris has been more vocal than ever about how much Michael meant to her. He was love," she once said. "He never let the fame touch our home. He made us feel like the most important people in the world." She's fiercely protective of his legacy, not the career highlights, but the man behind the music. She's spoken out against the rumors, the documentaries, and the endless attempts to rewrite his story. "He gave his life to make people happy," she said, "and they tore him apart for it." As she honors her father, Paris Jackson isn't living in his shadow. She's walking beside it. With the world watching, she's building something far more powerful than a comeback. She's building a future that belongs to her alone. From survivor to star in her own right. At 27, Paris Jackson is no longer just Michael's daughter. She's a singer, actress, writer, and advocate. But most importantly, she's her own person, strong, self-aware, and unapologetically real. She continues to release music that blends folk, rock, and soul, writing every lyric from her own experience. She recently wrapped a film that's set for festival release and signed a new creative deal with a major streaming platform. But more than any headline or contract, it's the peace in her voice that stands out most. Her life has been marked by whispers, but now she speaks for herself. "I used to feel like I was drowning in questions," she said. "Now I'm okay just being me." She spends time with close friends, advocates for causes she believes in, and shares quiet moments of joy on her terms. Whether it's feeding a rescue animal or performing a stripped-down song to a small crowd, Paris isn't chasing fame. She's chasing freedom. And for someone who once felt like her life was not her own, that's the biggest victory of all. As one fan wrote, "Recently, she didn't inherit a throne. She built her own." Paris Jackson's story is one of pain, rumors, resilience, and above all, truth. She took the world's obsession with her DNA and turned it into a declaration of love, strength, and identity. And no matter what anyone says, she knows exactly who she is and who her father was. Paris Jackson has spoken, and whether the world believes her or not, she's made one thing clear. The truth about Michael's death is far from simple. From years of painful silence to a powerful public stand, she's rewriting the story people thought they knew. What do you think? Was it really just a tragic accident? Or is there more to the mystery? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the truth isn't in the headlines. It's in the silence that follows.